Recording. Okay.
Oh, we're live. There we go.
Yay! All right. It's always exciting when it works, even though like that's what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll
I
just
think
wait for people to join in the chat, and we'll let them know. We're just waiting for Giselle. She went to get some water and get ready. So
it's always a little shocking when I like have the live show on a different tab and I see my face pop up.
yes, it's really distracting. And like I remembered to mute it this time, so I won't have to like hear the echo or anything. But it's still weird seeing everything like a few seconds behind.
Yeah, I didn't know that it's always just a little bit slow.
Yeah, I know. It takes getting used to. I mean, this is what I guess our fifth one technically, since we did like the test broadcast, and I'm still like, this is weird. I don't really understand it.
Yeah, I forgot it. We've been doing this is the fifth one. Wow.
I know. I know.
And we still haven't gotten another trailer for the film, and I'm getting very scared.
Yeah. I know. Well, some of the promotional stuff that they have released for it, I don't know. I'm like hopeful, but I'm nervous. Like I don't this could be a disaster. But like on the upside, the one thing that I'm like, even if the movie is awful, the one thing that I'm happy about is that I think it's gonna make more people get into the series. Like I think it's gonna make it more of a thing, you know? I mean, like even with Percy Jackson, which is like famous for having like the worst movie adaptation ever, I do think it got people more into the series. So like that's gonna be exciting that we're actually gonna have. I don't know. It'd be great to be able to actually get like merchandise for this series. Like,
Yeah,
nothing.
Where is my sexy butler? So salty
like, give
about
people what they want.
Give just me what I want.
I know. Like, you could special order it. Like,
I just want M'Baku or The Rock playing Butler.
okay.
Yeah.
I think I have. I keep like checking that I have the right tab open so I can actually see the chat. I think we're good. Just waiting for people to join.
Yeah, for the next chat, I'm going to try and, or the next time we do this, since it'll be on my show, I'm going to try and have the chat box open on the side so that I'm not flipping between tabs.
Yes, I know, and I keep doing that, and I always remember that I need a separate window for the chat after we've already started talking. Like I never remember when I'm just getting ready for it. Like this time I did, and I was extremely proud of myself.
Yeah.
Let's see. Maybe I should type.
Okay, I'm here for real now. Hi.
Let me see. Your hair looks so nice. I know I've already said that, but it looks really nice.
Oh, thank you. I cut it all off last night because I was annoyed.
I feel that.
Yeah, I'm so impressed with like people who can cut or trim their own hair. Like I cut my bangs. I think everyone had like the experience where they cut their bangs by themselves once when they were little. Like I think a lot of people had that. I did that. It did not go well. So
I cut my hair all the time as a kid, and it was always awful. My mom always had to fix it majorly.
Well, you got good at it though.
And then I would like cut my doll's hair, not realizing that it wouldn't grow back.
Yeah, I cut doll's hair too.
I did that a lot.
Yeah, there's one in particular.
Yeah, I know. I think I cut like one of my really like pretty like rag doll's hair, and I'm so sad. like I don't have that doll anymore. I think my mom got rid of it like after I like whacked all its hair off.
Yeah,
I was like, I don't know.
You're gonna be evidence.
So. Anyway, yeah, my hair's like almost as short as yours now, Kara.
I know.
I feel like I should cut mine to match you. It's so curly, it's just gonna spring up to an afro.
I think you'd look like. I mean, I love your long hair too, but I think you could also look really cute with short hair. I feel like your face shape has like you could work a lot of different lengths of hair. You know.
Actually, my sophomore year of college, I had it shoulder length, which I like, but I'm going to wait to try it again.
Yeah.
But afros are so pretty.
I know, but it doesn't fit my personality. I'm not cool enough.
That's not
Is
true.
that a Jane Austen mug, Taylor?
Yeah, my friend Emma got it for me. It says ostentatious.
I love that. That is
Thank
so cool.
you.
I usually like the
That's a cute
poster.
one.
I don't know if you can see because it's kind of in a weird spot, but it's like all these different editions of the cover of Pride and Prejudice.
Oh my god, I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Cute. Ooh, you
I
should
need
send
more
me a
Jane in my
picture
life.
of that.
Yes, I will have to take a picture.
We
of
should
that.
post a picture on Twitter after this,
Please
Do
do.
so I can see it in more detail.
Yes, I know.
I
I
was
still
watching-
haven't gotten. I still haven't re-downloaded the Twitter app. I've just been using it on my computer, and it makes it kind of annoying to coordinate stuff like this. But it's been so great for my like peace of mind. Like, it has been really nice, actually.
Yeah. Twitter's
The only
always
annoying
on
thing-
fire.
The only annoying thing, and maybe this is just because like I haven't figured out how on Twitter, but it's really, it doesn't let you like switch between accounts on.
You can always go incognito.
That's true. I might do that then.
So you don't have to like sign out and sign in every time. You can just
Oh,
go
yeah.
incognito. and
Right.
then
I'll
sign
have
into
to
Twitter.
try that.
And I think in incognito they let you remember passwords, so you should just be able to take a minute longer like to sign in because you have to like start typing it in, but then it won't like automatically fill.
Okay, I'll have to try that then. I did actually write some notes down this time, so I'm pretty professional over here now. Just because like there were a couple of things where it's like I definitely wanted to talk about, and I knew that I would forget them if I didn't actually write them down. But I probably
Yeah.
still forgot stuff. But you know,
I had
No.
the same thought, but I didn't actually write them down. I was just like, I hope I don't forget this thing I want to talk about.
I've got 2 points that I want to talk about. So you guys are way ahead of me.
oh.
Because
I just-
Giselle, I was telling her that I finished this technically an hour ago. About hour, 30 minutes ago, so.
I broke my streak and I didn't read it the morning of. I read it 2 days ago. Like,
Ooh, look at you!
really proud of myself. I'm like, wow, I'm such an adult planning this.
Yeah. Yep. I know. I told Taylor like it was a couple of days ago. And I was like, I don't need to finish this tonight. I have like so much time. I think it was like Wednesday or Thursday or something. And I was like, no, you know what? If you don't finish this tonight, you're going to be reading it Sunday afternoon again. Like, just use the free time you have right now to finish this book. Finished it about 45 minutes ago.
Yeah, that's husband. He was like, I'll read it on Friday, and then Friday came and went. And he's like, I guess I'm reading it this weekend. So I think that's what he's been doing while I've been gone. He's just been plowing through it, trying to get it done.
Yep. Whatever works, you know.
Oh. But
Oh my god, I switched
get
back
started?
to the. Yeah, let's get started.
All right. So, do we want to kind of do what we've been doing and start with like general thoughts or reactions, like how you feel after finishing the book?
Sure.
Yeah. You go first, Giselle.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Did you guys see my rating?
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Yes. I gave it 3 stars.
Interesting.
So I don't know, like I liked it. It's definitely fun, but I don't know. I always remember this being one of my favorites in the series, like in my top like 3 or 4 of the series. And I just like was really underwhelmed while reading it. I feel like it partially could be because maybe I wasn't in the right set of mind while reading it or whatever, but it was just like took the levels of cheesiness to a new level somehow. I feel like in a lot of ways where like I feel like this is like has some of the most like serious moments so far out of the series, yet it was super cheesy and like there were a lot of things that like irritated me about it, and I'm like, this just doesn't make sense. And I just feel like by book 4 in a series, you should be more consistent with like your characters and your choices. And there were like a few things that like really shouldn't have bothered me as much as they did, but they did. And like overall it was still fun, but I didn't think it was like exceptional. So
Go ahead, Taylor.
I think my feelings were a little more positive than yours, Giselle. I think I haven't rated it yet, but I'm stuck between a 3.5 and 4. I liked it more than the Arctic incident. I'm not sure if I liked it as much as the Eternity Code, and of course the first one is just my favorite. It's top tier. But I can kind of consider it, and I'll go into more detail with this later, but it's kind of the Goblet of Fire of the Artemis Fowl series, where you start realizing how like it gets a little more adult in this one,
Yeah.
I think. And the stakes are a lot higher this time around, I think. I think it was just fun. I would say it lacks a lot of what I found really charming about the first book, especially, I don't know, I think I'm just attached to Artemis in the first book much more than I am Artemis now as he's progressed, but that's just a personal preference. But overall, I thought it was a really fun adventure, and it was nice seeing all of the characters work together, and it was nice seeing Opal again, however frustrating she could be.
Yeah. I think my feelings, I also remembered this being one of my favorites. Well, I think in some ways I actually preferred it to the Eternity Code this time around. Because I feel like this one, there's a lot, like Taylor was kind of saying, like there was a lot of more heavy, like emotional stuff. Like I feel like we start seeing a lot of consequences in this book. Like we have a major character death for the first time.
Yeah.
And that was like a big deal. And I think that was a really well written scene. Like every time I read that part, I'm still like really upset about it. And I like that, like this book I think has a couple of my favorite like scenes. So I think that also like made my enjoyment higher. Like I love the whole painting heist at the beginning. I really enjoy that. But like I love just seeing Artemis just like destroy everyone with a plan. Like I just really enjoy that. And I think it's hilarious that he's so bad at being a normal teenager. Like he's walking around with his like Walkman, and he's like, "Hey, dude," and he's like, "Nailed it!" Like so bad at it, and I find that really endearing. So there are things like that I enjoyed about it. I will say, like, I'm surprised I enjoyed this one so much because Opal is not my favorite villain. I actually like, I don't know, for some reason I don't find her as compelling as some of the other like antagonists that we have. Like, and I think that's partly because I just don't tend to like reusing villains. Although in this case, like, I think it's believable that Opal would do this. You know, like she's absolutely a person who would like construct this convoluted plan that involves her going into a coma for like 6 months or a year. Like she would do that, so it's like believable. But yeah, like I think I still, like I said, I think I still ended up giving it like 4 or 4.5 stars because I liked enough about it that even though like some of it I guess is kind of unbelievable, but I guess that's never been on my radar with this series. And I feel like overall when I read books, I don't really like I care more about like an interesting story and like an internally consistent story than I do about like, could this happen in the real world? And I think that sometimes is what throws people off, is that it is set in the modern world, but it's like there's fairies and like a lot of the science they talk about couldn't actually happen, even though like some of it sounds kind of plausible. Yeah, so I guess that's just like my issue is like it doesn't bother me. I don't pay attention to how believable stuff is. I'm like, if I'm entertained and I like the characters and it more or less makes sense with the world of the story, it like doesn't bother me as much, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Chris said that Opal felt like an overtly evil cartoon villain. Yeah, I feel like she was a little over the top, and like I guess in a way it kind of makes sense because that whole cleansing coma thing she does, like human beings, and I presume pixies, just like beings in general, like we're not really made to just like shut down for 6 or 12 months in our own head and then just be fine. Like that's not really
Yeah. I would also say the book mentioned something sort of offhandedly that I thought was very, well, an early 2000s view of mental health, but just a very weird thing to add, that she was schizophrenic.
Yeah.
That was just such a very early 2000s thing to add, because when I was listening to it, I was like, oh, that's a,
Like, not really what that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like some of the like the fact that she deteriorates, like her mental state deteriorates so quickly, that is kind of I don't know, I guess that did feel a little bit over the top, but again, she's like, and she's also, she did this weird like hormone surgery so that she wouldn't grow anymore, or no, she would start growing, and she would like basically turn into kind of a human, but not really. So I guess like there are things that could explain it. I just feel like there wasn't an effort to explain it. It's like she's just like this now. Like,
yeah, she's interesting because I don't know. I feel like I had a different memory of her growing up. I remember her being a lot more nefarious, and this time around, I was reading it. I'm like, girl, it's a little weird. Why would you do that?
Don't look at me. It's bad for my skin.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's because I never got to the rest of the series, but she was always the big bad to me. And, you know, at least in the Arctic incident, she was pretty, you know, pretty evil. And this time around, I was like, I mean, okay, are we in spoiler territory now?
I think so. I mean, I think we can assume that if people are watching the fourth one, that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, when she killed Root, I thought that was pretty like on par. And that was, I don't want to say it was my favorite part of the book, but it was my favorite part of the book because
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was listening to it, and the entire time, like, the writing was just so good where it had me on edge. And yeah, I mean, that was a very good moment for Opal. Not good, but you know.
No, I know what you mean. She was very like effective there.
It established her as a viable threat, and then she just deteriorates so much throughout the book that yeah.
I think I agree. I think she's best when she's like understated, like the part where she tells Holly that like there was never a sweet spot on the device, like I lied to you, you couldn't have saved him. Like it's so chilling, and like that whole scene and their whole interaction, like I think she's really, I like her best as a villain when she's not being like super, I don't know, super dramatic about it, I guess. But yeah, like actually Ruth's death scene is one of the things that I wanted to talk about, because like not only is it just like a big deal in the series, because this is the first time, I think it's the first time we've had a major character death, right? Because like we thought Artemis's dad was dead, but they saved him and everything. So I feel like it's a turning point in the series.
Yeah.
Which, Taylor, you kind of alluded to with the Goblet of Fire comparison, which I think is really a very apt comparison. But yeah, like I remembered, I think one of the reasons I didn't think I liked this book as much the first couple times I read it is because Root died, and that made me sad. And I'm like, if a book makes me sad, it can't be my favorite. Like, but I think now I like really appreciate it, because even though I've read that scene, I don't know how many times, like I've reread this book a lot, it still like affects me. Like every time I read it, like the part right before it happens when Holly is still freaking out, but she's still like, there's a way out of this, like we can do something about it. And he just says like, be well. I think that's what his like last words are. And I'm like, oh, like, I mean, Root had his irritating moments, especially in the first book, where he's like, you're a girl and I have to treat you bad because you're a girl, because otherwise it'd be sexist or something like that. And I'm like, that's nonsense. So like there were things about him I found frustrating, but I think like this book and I guess like the previous ones too, like did a really good job of showing that like he does care about the people under his command, and like he is a really good person. And it's just, yeah, it was hard to lose him. It's always hard to lose him.
Chris said, is Root actually dead? I couldn't get past the feeling like he's not actually dead. I kept expecting him to come back. And I totally had that feeling the first time I read this as well. I was like, when is he going to pop back up? When was this just like a mistake or whatever? Yeah. Like, what's happening? And I had that feeling the first time as well. So,
and
an elaborate trick.
Yeah, and it looks like Priscilla and Yvette from Bookie Charm and Book Cave, like they said the same thing, that they were in disbelief for most of the book. They wanted to find a way to bring him back, and that like it was another trick, and like he would be okay. But you know what's funny is I don't think I ever I don't think I ever thought that. I'm pretty sure the first time I read this book, I was like, he's dead now. Like this is how things are. But what's really funny is like when my dad read the series like a long time ago, he did the same thing that you guys are talking about. He was like, there's no way, like they're gonna bring him back by the end of the book. He's like too good of a character. He's coming back. And I'm like, Dad, no, like that's not like gonna happen. He's like, trust me, I know what I'm talking about. I know entertainment. I'm like, okay.
Oh no, the first time I read it, I was like, well, okay, he's gone. Well, and then at the end of the book, they referred to like when they were recycling him that they took what was left of Root, and I was like, oh, that's dark.
Yeah.
And the fact that Holly isn't even allowed to attend this ceremony.
I will never not be mad about that.
No, like I feel like what's his name? Sewell? Ark Sewell, I think.
Yeah.
He is honestly, I think, one of the most like genuinely frightening villains to me in this series because he feels so realistic. Like he's just some bureaucratic asshole who doesn't care if he hurts people as long as he's like following the rules or whatever. Like it's just like there's so many people like him that I guess it like makes it he seems like a much more threatening villain to me in some ways than like
he has this like very strong moral code as well where he like totally feels like he's in the right, and he's one of those people also that you can like argue a side for him as well, whereas like a lot of villains that are doing really horrible things, you're like, what is wrong with you? Like I can't see why we would do this. But like him, I could see getting inside his head and him being like, I'm in the right and I'm totally justified in this and everything, which again makes him feel realistic.
And actually, like one of the things I noticed in this book especially is like something the series does that I definitely didn't pick up on when I was younger, but I'm kind of appreciating now, is like how there's kind of this running theme of like people in authority are not always good. Like they don't always want what's best for people. Like there's one part, I think I marked it actually near the beginning of the book.
Well, Chris, even when he said, I'm actually surprised he's dead for real, he talks about like Foley talks about having to watch him like explode as well. He has to like play it back in order to like see the box on his chest or whatever, and he talks about that, which is like I don't think I had picked up on that either when I'd read it before, that like Foley has to rewatch that, and he's like, this is the most horrifying thing I've ever seen, and I'm like, yes, you're watching your friend explode in reverse.
So I don't remember if this was the part that I was thinking of, and this is like a not as bad of an example as some other stuff, but at the very beginning when it's like the prologue and it says, we've all heard the official explanation for the tragic events surrounding the Zito probe investigation. The LEP's statement contained little in the way of concrete detail, preferring to fudge the facts and question the decisions of a certain female officer. And like that's only like a short kind of description of it, but I just like that's like the first page of the book. And I just remember, like, when I read it this time, I was struck by how like interesting it is. They're like, hey, so this is a police force, like a group of people in authority, and like they're lying about something that happened, and they're blaming, like, you know, it felt very like, I don't know, subversive in a way. I was like, you go, Owen Colfer. Like sometimes people don't mean well. Like sometimes people who are like in positions of authority or power, it's like they cover things up, and it's. Yeah, I don't know. I just remember being like, I'm surprised this isn't a kid's book. Like,
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here like, on top of the death and stuff that, you know, this is for kids. And I mean, honestly, the death was probably the thing that really brings it around. But when I was reading it younger, I didn't take into account all of the bureaucratic stuff. Because as a kid, that was boring to me.
Same. Yeah. Oh, let me see.
I'm going to grab my heater really quickly.
Okay.
All right. Oh, yeah, Chris was saying that Sewell also creeped him out more than Opal as well.
Yeah.
Because
I did also want to... Oh.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to point out also that Chris said something funny earlier, that he always like pictured Opal like twirling her villainous cartoon mustache after everything she said, which I wish I had pictured that while reading it.
Yes.
Just added so much to it. Okay, sorry. Go about Sewell.
No, that's great. That added a lot to the conversation because now that's what I'm going to imagine. Just like a really ostentatious, like just.
Yeah, because Opal's still not dead, right?
No.
She's gotten picked up and is like held in captivity again, but like the fairies don't like have like a death punishment.
Okay,
They just
yes, I was
like
gonna say
always
that.
like they always just like put them in, which is like, I don't know. Like they always just like put them in prison and then they always escape. Just like with the guy from Howler's Peak and like all this stuff, like maybe work on like making your prisons better then, because
Your
so many
prisons
people are
suck.
breaking out all the time. Like maybe fix that.
Like the number of times that like Mulch alone has escaped from like containment or like custody or like prison or anything. I'm like, do you guys really have no backup plan for containing magical creatures? Like, you guys are magical creatures. How are you so bad at this? Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, that
you
like
imagine-
all he had to do to escape in this one is he just like sucked in a lot of air and like compressed it and just like swam away, and I'm like, what?
yeah. And like, it's good for us and it's good for the main characters that their prisons are so bad, because like we needed Mulch to escape. But yeah, there's been a couple of things where I'm like, has nobody ever thought about this possibility before? Like, oh, I remember what it was. It was when at the very beginning, when they're talking about how the Goblin General escaped, and they're like, oh, he like walked out in someone else's shed skin, and I'm like, he was holding his skin around him, and nobody was like, this looks suspicious. Like,
yeah, they don't do like routine checks for skin.
yeah, and like I guess what we're supposed to get from that, or like kind of what I got from that, is like, I think the LEP in general, and like fairies actually, the fairy people, have gotten pretty cocky about how like technologically advanced they are about everything. Because like every time the humans do something they weren't expecting, they're like astonished. Like, so I guess I don't know. I guess they're kind of used to being the most like well-developed species ever, and so they don't do like normal things, like maybe have an actual person review a security tape instead of relying on Foley's computer to catch everything. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very cocky, and then also on top of that is that they don't know very much about the magical creatures themselves. Like, it's said so often that like nobody really knows this about dwarfs, and I'm like, how? You're
So
thousands and thousands of years old. Yeah, like, but it's ridiculous, and it's like, how do these fairies, like, especially people who know so much and who are like super knowledgeable and like everything, like, how do you not know that dwarf spit can do this or that dwarfs can do this? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense that they're like the people who claim to want to know everything and know so much and are like really about that, and then they don't know anything about each other at all.
Yeah. Side note about Mulch and the dwarves. Mulch went to college. There was like a throwaway line about him going to college. I was like, wait. What? They just threw that in because he was on the track team or something in college, and then they just dropped it.
yeah, I feel like Mulch, there's like all these offhanded references to how old he is. Like, he's like 700 years plus, I think, right? At this point, like, and he's got so much backstory that we never hear about. So I feel like anytime they bring up something, like they could be like, oh, he wrestled the Loch Ness monster one time, and I'm like, probably. Like, like there's just he's so old and he's had so many weird experiences that at this point, like, nothing would surprise me about him. Like, which I guess that's the goal, is like, you believe anything about Mulch.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to derail the conversation from how fairies don't know anything about each other, but that I was listening to it today and that popped up and I was like, wait, he's college educated?
I wonder what his degree was in. Like,
Mulch has a PhD in philosophy.
Oh, did it say that?
No.
I was like, whoa, really?
I should have said yes.
Yeah, I would have bought
I don't know. Also, like, I don't know, like, the fairies are also, just like to nitpick some more, the fairies obviously are like more technologically advanced than us, but in a lot of ways they aren't. And also maybe that's just having to do with like looking back from right now reading a book that was written in 2002 or whatever that's like, oh, that's so cute that you think that's impressive when like that's really not at all anymore. But they're so far ahead of humans that they like had cameras in like 100 BC and like stuff like this where he's like, oh yeah, I took a picture of this when this happened. And I'm like, really? You took a picture of it? Like, can you at least like just not throw whatever you want in there and at least like make it somewhat believable for us, Owen, please? Because like how technologically advanced they were at like certain times, I'm like, I don't believe that they would have gone the way that they did with like all living underground and like all this stuff when they could do so much. And I don't believe that. And like it's not like they're the most like they claim to be like fairly docile creatures, but they're not. They have like they're not afraid to like kill people and like all this stuff. Like I don't believe that they wouldn't do all these things. And like I don't know, like I just don't feel like it's very consistent. Like maybe if they like become super technologically advanced in like 1600s or 1500s, but when people were becoming more enlightened, and so then they felt the need to hide. But I'm like, really, you had cameras in like BC? I'm like, it's just a bit much for me. Sorry.
Well, and we talked about this before about how like in some ways the fairies are so far behind humans. Like the fact that Holly was the first recon officer who was female, and they've been around for how many thousands or like hundreds or thousands of years, like that's pretty wild. And I think some amount of that is like supposed to happen, because we were kind of talking about how there's like this, like at the beginning you're like, okay, so fairies are good, humans are bad, like humans are killing the planet, and like fairies are really good and they're environmentally conscious and like they don't make other species go extinct and stuff like that. And then you kind of realize all these things, like, yeah, the fairies they're kind of bad too. Like they don't have this, like they act like they have this like concern for all life and everything, and they kind of don't. Like when Holly makes the decision to like put herself in harm's way to save a bunch of humans from the troll, like in the first book, everybody's like, that's a weird decision, like what are you doing? Like, so I wonder if some of it is intentional. But yeah, I do think there could have been more information given about how their technological development actually went. Because like we get pieces every now and then, like you said, that mentions they had cameras in the year like 100 or something.
Yeah, like I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like 7 Wonders of the World. He had like a picture of like the Library of Alexandria or something, and I'm like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
okay.
I had a library card.
I would have liked more information about that, because like, does having magic make them better at creating technology? Like that's really interesting. I'd like to hear more about that. But yeah, I guess it's like not really.
Yeah.
Owen Coulter's like, that's not the point. Like,
yeah, I have the feeling that I don't want to say not a lot of thought went into it, but I think Owen Coulter was creating the world he wanted and didn't really care about timelines or, you know, having people have a concrete set of abilities and not adding them into other books. Another complaint I had about these books is the sort of race relations between different species of fairies. Like, it seems weird that all goblins are evil. You know, it would have been nice to have a little bit of nuance in that, but it's fine. And I think something like Root or Holly said something about, well, I guess I'll risk my life for a goblin, or I hate risking my life for a goblin, or something. And I was like, that's harsh. You're a cop.
I noticed that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess it's possible to create, like in a fantasy book, if you really wanted to, like I guess you could create a whole race of creatures where it's like they're just bad, like just because. But it's hard not to look at that and be like, like questionable. Like why is it so important for the story that you have no good goblins? You know, like especially because like only in the second book are they really the main villain.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, why did you need to spend all this time telling us that like they're always bad when it's like they're not even that important as antagonists? Like,
yeah. And I think
it's.
Oh, go ahead.
I just also think it's really interesting that like every other fairy species that we've at least heard about are all very like humanoid. Like they look like humans or constructed like humans, and then this one random, like even centaurs are like half human-esque, and it's like this one species that isn't human-esque is like the bad, really like stupid one, besides trolls, which are also the bad stupid ones. So it's like, I don't know, I feel like that could have been a little bit more diverse and interesting than like the two that like aren't very human-esque, which like is a choice, I guess. But then also like we hear about like gnomes, and I'm like, why don't we have a gnome main character? That sounds really fun, but I guess gnomes are really stupid and slow, so blah, blah, blah. It's like,
and I think also that the trolls, from what we've seen of them, it's almost like they're not supposed to be a species that is in the same category as the other ones. Like it seems almost like trolls are talked about as if they're what's the word I'm looking for? Like a magical creature.
They're not magical at all, though.
Well, yeah, not magical, but it's like I'm thinking like in Harry Potter, I'm thinking like it's the difference between like a centaur character and like a niffler, you know, like there's like the characters that have lines in the book, and then there's the magical creatures that just run around and do stuff and like eat, you know. So it's like, I guess the trolls are like, they're almost treated like they're on that caliber of like not having like conscious thought almost. But then like in this one we kind of see that they do, like they can make decisions obviously, and they can like figure stuff out and like build bridges, and I don't know, it was just like, it was weird. I feel like the troll thing is like kind of inconsistent, where I'm like, are they on the same level as like elves and goblins and stuff, or are they like are they like swear toads that just get like, by the way, they exist and they're like, I think they're most animals
like monkeys, where they can be smart and they're good at like certain things and reasoning and rationale or whatever, but not to the extent. But I question trolls being in there at all as like a magical creature, because they don't have any magic. If trolls lived on Earth in this world, it wouldn't be weird. I mean, they probably would be extinct because humans would be like, F that, and like kill them all. But like, I think it's interesting that he chose to make a creature and then describes it in such a way that it's just like, it's not actually very interesting, because something like that could plausibly exist.
Yeah.
It's like a mix between a bunch of things. It's like a mix between a little bit of like a tiger and a bear, and it has like poison, so like maybe a bit like a snake or a spider who like subdues their creatures with like venom, and like it's like a components of a lot of stuff, but it's not actually magical. So I don't know why like a troll like getting out is like the worst thing ever.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that also I just think the way they sort of talk about humans treating animals and people, and the way the fairies do, is not a very practice what you preach thing. They're very against this whole troll thing and goblins and so on. But then I remember in the first book, they were talking about how humans discriminate against each other for race and religion and so on. But, you know, here Root is being reluctant to save a goblin. And then in this book, the way trolls are treated, which are not quite animal, but not quite fairy thing, but then are like, I don't know, just the way they talk about humans treating animals and other people doesn't always match up with how fairies are. And it would be one thing if that were examined, you know, the sort of hypocrisy, but it never is. It's played just completely straight.
Yeah, I feel like I seem to remember in later books that we get more of like a specific discussion of how hypocritical the fairies are. But like, I don't remember when that happens. But I also think like it's interesting that Holly is one of the only characters that like pretty much every time she ends up on the side of like defending the living creatures, like whatever they are, if they're humans, if they're trolls, if they're goblins, she's the one that's like, we have to go and save them anyway, because like that's what we do. And obviously Holly is one of the good guys. We're supposed to, I feel like in general, we're supposed to like empathize with her point of view about anything, about most things. So I do think it's interesting that even though there is that very hypocritical like fairies discriminate thing, I do think it's kind of interesting that like one of the, like, I mean, arguably one of the most like non-complicatedly like she's not morally gray, you know, like Holly's got a very
Yeah.
strong moral compass. So I do think it's interesting that she is always on the side of we save everyone, you know, and I wonder if that was purposeful, if that's kind of a subtle way of preparing us for like, hey, the way that the fairy races view each other is not actually as good as they say it is.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about Artemis's character arc at this point? Because I
Okay.
think that's pretty interesting in this one.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. You want to go first, Giselle?
No.
I
I think Kara should go first.
Okay.
feel like I have a lot of tea to spill about this one.
Okay. This is such a weird book because like you see him regress, but he's not like quite as bad as he was in the first couple books, you know? And it's really weird seeing him be like, why am I feeling sympathy for other people? Like, what is this strange, disconcerting emotion I have? Like,
Yeah.
And I do appreciate that when Holly just shows up and she's like, hey, there are fairies, like this is your life now. Even though he doesn't, there's like a part of him that like doesn't actually believe her. He's smart enough. Well, obviously he's supposed to be smart, but like he's smart enough to go along with it until he can figure it out. Because he's like, just in case this is true, I don't want to die from like not believing it. And I think like the whole like painting thing, I thought was like I enjoyed that. Like it's a little bit, I guess it's a little bit like easy in that like he gets his memories back and by the end of the book he's donated the painting. Like I can see why that's not necessarily well supported, you know, because it's like, okay, well, if it's that easy to like change somebody's morality and like their personality and everything, like that's kind of weird. But I like it anyway, you know, like I just really like how much how different Artemis is from the first book, but not so different that he doesn't feel like the same character. Like the part where he's realizing like I think he's just watched the tape that like brought his memories back, and the part where he's realizing like, oh, I have friends, like I have people who care about me, and I'm like, oh, I'm like you're still kind of a little shit, but oh, like you have friends now. Anyway, so yeah, that was like kind of rambling, but basically there are some issues I have with how his arc is handled in this book. It's like we take 2 steps forward and then we take the same, or 2 steps back and then we take the same like 2 steps forward after that like video disc thing that like fixes everything. And I'm like a little unbelievable, but I'm okay with it. I guess that's like the bottom line.
Yeah, I agree with you. I will say my favorite aspect of Artemis, or favorite iteration of Artemis Fowl, is still book 1 Artemis Fowl, just because it's really nice to see him just one up everyone and be really snarky and mean about it. But that's more of a personal preference in terms of, you know, how he's progressed. It does work. And I do like that at the beginning of the first book, like you said, even though he's kind of regressed back to his whole criminal, I guess, nature, there still is part of him that is still good. And the part of him that developed while he was with the fairies, that's still there, although he doesn't entirely know why. Yeah. You know, and at the end, seems like not a well-adjusted teenager, but you know, he's adjusting better.
He's better than he was, yeah.
Exactly. But I still find good Artemis just a little cheesy, and I mean, I don't wish we could go back to evil Artemis, but that's my favorite version of Artemis.
Yeah. Even though that's really cheesy too.
Oh, it is, but at least it's cheesy and evil.
I think it's hard for me to read these books not in the context of the whole series. I don't know if like you guys are having this problem, but I think that's one of the reasons why I overlook some things that I maybe normally wouldn't for other books, is because like I know kind of the full story. Like, you know, I kind of know his arc overall, and I know like the book's arc overall. So I think that also affects like I'm a little more forgiving because I know why certain things happen and like how it's going to go. So I mean, like I'm fully admitting I'm like biased in that way. Like I don't know, it's really hard for me to like read and review this book as if I've never read the others before. And I don't normally have that problem, but I guess like with this series, because it's such an important one for me and I've read it so much, it's like I can't just discount like 80% of my experiences with this book, you know?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is the last one I read before I stopped reading the series. So as far as I know, this is how the series ended. And yeah, so I'm excited to see where it will go. I'm sad we're not going to get any more Julius, which I did really enjoy his character, as frustrating as he could be.
Yeah.
But I have no idea where the rest of the series is going to go. So.
Oh crap, Karen! Now you're making me think, and I'm like, I'm so not ready for the ending of book 8 now.
I'm
not thinking it. I was pushing it out of my head, but I don't know. I'm not ready for the end now, and I'm like, oh crap.
I'm not.
Oh,
I know.
no.
I was just thinking about this like a couple days ago for some reason. I'm like not gonna be ready. It's like 3 or 4 months away, and I'm already like, can't do this. No.
I don't know. I haven't read this entire series. So my experience reading the series, I read the first 7, and then when the 8th book came out, I kind of like skim read it. I know how it ends. I know how the series ends, but I never actually read the entire book. And I haven't read the full series again since then. So I've never really thought about book 8 again after like that one like sort of half reading.
Honestly,
so now,
I try to forget about it.
So I'm like very interested to see what I'll think of it, like reading it fully. But I'm like, oh, I think I'm remembering some stuff that happens in that, right? And like I feel like this book ties into that and is like a big setup book, which I never realized that this is a setup book, but it is, which is again correlates to the Harry Potter, where like the 4th book is like kicks off a lot of stuff for the rest of the series, and this one does too. And I never thought about that before.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
I also like I have never read this series this spread out before. Like this has always been a series I marathon. Like within like 1 week, I like generally is like I would read like I'm in like full Artemis Fowl mode. And I mean the last time I reread the whole series was like long before BookTube, and like before I was on, like I had discovered BookTube as a thing, or it might even be like before I had like Goodreads and I was actually like tracking what I read, which would have been a while ago. So it's really weird for me, like not reading all of these back to back. You know, I'm wondering if that's also like affecting my experience with it in some way. But I mean, it's nice to try something different. It's just like, it feels weird. Like it feels really weird having a month, especially between book 3 and book 4, because like book 3 ends with like Artemis getting his mind wiped, and it's like I have to wait. Like, I mean, I didn't have to wait. I could have started it immediately, but like having that month between like discussing the books, it's like it feels like we had to wait a long time to have that resolved. And I'm like, I'm used to instant gratification, like jumping immediately into the next one if I want to.
I agree with you. There is that bit of a worry there. I remember finishing book 3, and all I remember from book 4 was that Opal is back and Julius dies. And I was like, oh man, I'm so nervous about Julius. I don't remember how he dies or why, but he's gone.
That would be like such a good, I mean, not a good, but like a very succinct tagline for book 4. Opal's back and Julius dies. Like that's all you've got to know.
That's all you need to know.
Those are the 2 main things that happen. Oh, and Artemis has friends.
He has friends now.
He's like, when he's like, I guess I need to read up on it, and she's like, what is wrong with you?
It's so awkward.
Also, another thing. Oh, sorry. Wait.
No, go ahead.
Another thing I like about this one is Holly and Artemis's interactions. I mean, and I always love seeing them, like whether they're like antagonists or like working together or what. It was really interesting seeing them kind of somewhere in the middle here, and like seeing them work together to like escape the troll.
The troll scene has always been my favorite part of this book.
Yeah,
I love the troll scene.
It's funny because like even knowing like however many times I've read this book, I know they get out fine. I know it's okay. I'm still always stressed out for the troll thing. I'm like, oh my god, they smell their blood. Like,
and he's like, maybe I should just like lay down and try to go back to sleep so I can wake up. And she's like, no, like you're gonna die. Don't. He's like, I could still just be hallucinating this all.
Actually, I think like one of my favorite lines in the whole book happens in that scene, and it's like after they tried to escape through the river, and Opal left that annoying television thing because she's like a petty bitch. Like, so they get out, they like crawl out of the water, and like Artemis mutes the TV, and he's like, "She's gonna regret this because it's little touches like that that give me the motivation to get out of here." Like, I just find that so hilarious because it's like it sums him up as a person, like because just saving his life is like not enough motivation to like get out of there, but somebody sasses him and like they are dead. Like they're going down. Like now he has the motivation to get out of here. Like that just really like cracks me up.
No, that was good. That was good.
I just enjoy that.
Giselle, are you excited because we got some Mulch Foley interaction book at the end?
Did we?
Yes, we did. Mulch slapped Foley on the butt.
Did
and
he?
We had a conversation.
How did I miss this? Like I said, I don't think I was in the right mindset while reading this. Oh, I need to go read the end.
I was like listening to it and I'm like, oh, Giselle is loving this. They spoke.
Oh, I don't remember this. I think
And
I
Foley
really
gives
just
him like a side hug. All of that good interaction.
I had a bad couple weeks of mental health, you guys. So like my brain has just been kind of like foggy the past week, especially. Has just not been great. So like, oh, I'm gonna have to read parts of that again. I think we still have the audiobook checked out from the library, so I'll have to go find that. And I have the physical book too. So, oh dang it! See, maybe that would have bumped it up to a 4-star for me.
Just that slap. It's an extra half star.
Oh gosh.
I don't know. I did want to say, going back to changing the subject, going back to like us reading this like a book at a time with like a month in between and doing a full like discussion on each book though. Like I'm very impressed as how much there is to talk about each book though, because like I feel like with most other like children's books or middle grade books or whatever, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't do that as fully, like especially with books fully as fully as books that were written around this time. Like I'm trying to think like what if you did this for like the like series of unfortunate events or whatever. Like there's honestly not that much to talk about for the first like 4 books. Like there is a lot to talk about, but not like as in depth. I feel like you could smash the first 2 together and then the next 2 together, and then from there like that's where the mystery takes off. But like this, I feel like there's a lot to talk about in each book, and I'm actually really impressed by that. And I don't know, our discussions always end up being like really long, so which is great.
Yeah.
I think it's impressive.
Yeah, no, I also am like very impressed at like the complexity and like how easy it is to find so much stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
Like for all of the books so far, like there hasn't been, I don't think there's been any discussion we've had where like we started it and I'm like, I don't really have anything that I want to talk about, you know, or that I want to say. Like, yeah, and I feel like this series is a good example for me of why I find age ranges really unhelpful and kind of arbitrary, because especially since the series feels like it goes between middle grade and YA like as you go, you know, like the later books I would definitely not call middle grade, but again I'm really bad at these like designations. But yeah, I feel like this is one of the series that makes me like not feel like it's a super helpful way to categorize books. Like I guess you could argue that as far as the character age goes, and I mean people tend to think that middle grade doesn't have like a lot of complex language, even though I've read a lot of middle grade that does.
Yeah.
So I guess like with those, if you want to be like very arbitrary and specific about it, you could make that argument. But like the themes are things that we see in like YA and adult books. Like even the character ages are like vastly different by the end of the series. Like there's so much stuff that happens in these books where it's like, I don't know, I wouldn't be like, yeah, like you're 7, you can read this whole series. Like I don't know. But
yeah, I feel like this is like the bridge book, like the which I feel like again was with Harry Potter, that book 4. I think this could still be like considered more in like the middle grade, or with book 4 with Harry Potter, that's like where it really gets to like more young adult, where like you can read it as a kid, but the book really matures between 3 and 4, and same thing with this one, like between 4, middle of 4 onto 5, like 5, from what I remember, is like very tonally different than the first 4 books have been thus far, and I think it totally changes how the series continues. So this is kind of like the end of like the first half of Artemis Fowl, and then we're moving into Act 2 or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, I feel like a lot of the books we categorize as middle grade is basically YA, but I would I guess less complex language, although not in the case of Artemis Fowl, where I think the language and the tone and the humor is not adult, but older. But I think it's just that because there's just so much violence in middle grade that I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. I lost my point.
No, like I know what you mean. It's like there's every category or like designation that I've heard people try to make like an argument for, well, this is what a middle grade book is, and you always can use this designation. There are so many exceptions that I have read and that I know other people have read that I'm like, this doesn't feel like a useful system, you know, like. Yeah. I mean, like I remember, it's actually one of my favorite authors is Frances Harding, who I talk about all the time. But like, I was astonished when I saw her books being sold as middle grade, because like the complexity of the language is something that like I had never heard people associate with middle grade before. And even though like I still wasn't really aware of like what an age range designation was when I like read that book like a few years ago, like so much about her books goes against all of the arguments I've ever heard about middle grade. Like the complexity of the language, it feels almost like literary fiction sometimes. I've even seen a couple of her books sold with adult books. Like the themes, like her books get really dark, things like that. I think even the character ages like can vary pretty widely. So like anything I've ever heard people say, like, well, this is what makes a middle grade book, it's like I can think of so many examples of when that's not true. And like I understand that it's useful for like content reasons. Like you know, there's books that even if a child is like capable of understanding them, maybe their parents wouldn't necessarily want to like give that to them when they're really young, you know, like.
Yeah.
But as far as like ranking books based on complexity, I don't find that helpful just by like saying, well, if it's easy to understand, we'll call it a middle grade. I'm like, what?
Yeah, especially because I feel like it's speaking down to kids, like they can't understand some of these themes. Like one of my favorite books when I was in late elementary school, early middle school was Animorphs, and that has a lot on like war and pacifism and when is war all bad? Can war be good? Characters are literally getting gutted and like sliced open, and that was a middle grade book. And you know, I mean, I understood it and I comprehended it, and I was in middle school. And with Artemis Fowl, I feel like it's not the same, but I mean, considering the fact that one of your major characters only had what was left of him by the time he died, like, that's dark.
Yeah. And also going off of length as well, where it's like, oh, you see the Animorphs books and you're like, oh, they're short, so they're simple and they're easy, or like that's how I feel like about like Nancy Springer, where like her books, they're always in the kids section, like her like Enola Holmes books, but she's 14, and but I think it's because they're short, and I think if they were a little bit longer, they would be in the YA section, but since they're around the 200-page mark, they're in middle grade, which doesn't make sense because they're really complex. They talk so much about like feminist issues and themes and like old themes, like for like an older audience, that I'm like, I read those books when I was 12, and I'm astounded going back and reading them as an adult, because I don't think I got anything out of them as a kid, because I just, even at 12, I don't think I could comprehend the complex themes in those books.
Yeah.
But I still really enjoyed them, and they're still really great. But like, they're definitely, I feel like, for an older audience, because they have so much packed into them, and like no word is like just thrown in. Like they're very concise. But they're put in middle grade, where I don't think, like, I would not give that to anyone under the age of like 12, just because there's so much in them.
Yeah. So. Part of me has to wonder if it's like a lack of, like, I don't know if it's just maybe a lack of talking about sex that makes it like middle grade or something, because that's really the only distinction I can think of.
Yeah.
But even with like YA, I don't.
Huh?
I don't like sex in my YA personally. Like, as from what I grew up reading as a teenager and what I personally feel like I would want my kids to read as teenagers, I don't want there to be sex in YA. And I know that's like a very unpopular opinion, but like, I want my YA to be on the PG to PG-13 range and stuff. And like, I don't know. Like, I read a lot of books now, and like they're in the YA section that have like so much like foul and vulgar language in them and stuff, and I'm just like, I don't want this. Like,
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I would be so happy if we moved into more of a like content system versus like an
Yeah.
age system, because yeah, it's like you might be an adult reader and you're like, I'm just not in the mood to read like a sex scene right now. So you can go to like a middle grade, a young adult, an adult, like any like age range of book, and you would just look to see what has like certain like content listings. Like, and well, and that also goes for like, this is getting into like a whole other topic. Sorry, guys. But like that also goes for things like trigger warnings. And I feel like people are like publishers too are getting a lot better about those, which is really great to see. But it's like you don't have to have, it's like you shouldn't have to like go through all of these hoops to find out if something in a book is going to be like upsetting for you. You know, like
Yeah.
I don't know. I just like I would love to see more of an effort made to like know certain things about the book you're going into, and like it's not a big deal, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
I had a customer a couple months ago that she like wanted a book for her like 13-year-old grandson, but she like wanted it from the adult section because he's a really good reader. And I made the comment like, oh, you just have to be a little bit more like aware of content in adult books. And she's like, but he's a really good reader. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with anything. I'm not calling
Yeah.
your grandson stupid. I'm just saying maybe he doesn't need to see like an orgy or something in a book. like it doesn't matter that he's a good reader. It doesn't mean that that's the appropriate thing for him to read. Or like this mom came in with her son and he literally looked like he was 8, and he's like, where's your Terry Brooks books? And I was like, why are you reading Terry Brooks? He's this high fantasy writer with like why? Like, I don't get it. And I don't know.
I mean, that happened to me when I was a kid, where technically when I was like 10 or 11, I was reading at or above a college level, but that doesn't mean that mentally or emotionally I was at or above a college level. So I was reading Wicked. I don't know if you're familiar with
no.
Yes.
Yeah, so the opening scene with like the elixir and the mom just straight up kid me couldn't understand like date rape or any of that stuff. So I was like, this feels wrong.
Yeah. I remember like I have such a clear memory of when I was in 5th grade, and I was the same. It was like they tested you and you're like, you're in a college reading level. You can check out anything. And like, so I got a book from our library. It was like historical fiction. I don't even remember. And I think I was like 9 or 10. And like, I guess I didn't know the word prostitute yet, because like when we were doing silent reading, you could go up to the teacher and ask if you didn't understand a word. So I go up to the teacher and I'm like, what does this word mean? And she reads it. And she's like, oh, she's like, that's, it's when a man pays a woman to be his girlfriend, but you should ask your parents about that one. I was like, okay. And like, it's just, I don't know. Like, I guess this discussion gets like tangled up in like censorship issues. And like, I definitely, like, none of us are advocating for like censoring books or like anything. But like when you have kids that like young kids that you're buying books for, it's like there is kind of, for a lot of people, I think a natural like, okay, well, I don't want to like actively give them things that are going to like be, you know, upsetting or, you know, whatever you want to.
Well, and I would say like, I mean, I was lucky enough where I had parents who could explain that to me in like a mature and reasonable way, but not every child has that.
Exactly.
And I think content warnings would be good because, you know, I shouldn't have been reading Wicked when I was 10 or 11 because I couldn't, you know, I wasn't emotionally ready for something like that. But, go ahead.
I did the same thing with Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister, because also by Gregory Maguire, because I'm like, I wanted to read all the fairy tale retellings. So I was checking out fairy tale retellings, and I checked that book out when I was, probably around 11. And I was like, thankfully I just thought it was like really boring and I didn't read it at the time. And then going back to it as an adult, I really enjoyed it, but I don't think I would have liked it at all if I had read it when I was 10, just because, like, not that there's like super mature, horrible content in that, but it's just like not a kid's book.
Yeah.
Like, it just isn't. And I was like, didn't enjoy it at all. And I really like it. It's one of my favorite Cinderella retellings now. But
yeah, I mean, it's maturity, it's life experience, and
It's
sorry
also, like,
to
sorry,
Huh?
go ahead. I was,
Oh, no.
I was just saying, like, it's also like the mood you're in. Like, sometimes, like, obviously I love fantasy. I read that a lot, but there's sometimes where it's like I'm gonna pick up a different genre, even though, like, I'm in the mood to read fantasy, because I just don't feel like having to deal with the like inevitable fantasy world sexism and like treatment of women. And like I have, yeah, it's like I've read a lot of fantasy books where there's like kind of an offhand like sexual assault scene or like things like that that like really don't need to be in the book. Like, it's not part of a larger story. So even stuff like that where it's like there'd be, you know, like having content warnings or content descriptions on a book where it's like, I'm not in a mental health space right now where I want to like read, like, come across this unexpectedly in a book. So sorry, what were you saying, Taylor? I just interrupted.
No, you're good. I was just gonna say, I wonder if some of it comes down to a gender bias in some cases. Like, at least with Sarah J. Maas's, like, I don't know if any of you read her or fans of her, but with her A Court of Mist and Fury series, it's very smutty, like very much so. And so it's very much what I would consider an adult fantasy series, but it's always with the young adult. And there's no reason for it to be other than it's Sarah J. Maas.
Yeah.
And she's a female writer. And I'm not, like, I love her Court of Thorns and Roses series, but I'm not here advocating that it's particularly complex. But I still think it at least deserves to be there with the other, like, man fantasy stories that are written similarly, but there's that. So I wonder if it bleeds over into middle grade.
Also, like, George R.R. Martin, like, I haven't watched or read Game of Thrones, so feel free to correct me, you know, but like, from what I've heard, he has like so much sexual content in his books, and it makes like his are considered like gritty and mature versus like female writers, I feel like. And you know, like you were describing the Sarah J. Maas, the ACOTAR ones, it's more like smut than, from what I've heard, it's more like smutty than like actual I don't know, like not graphic content. What am I trying to say here? Like,
I mean, it's not meant to be consumed. Okay, no, I'm not using that wording. I'm not gonna do that. It's not meant to be enjoyed with the George R. R. Martin. Presumably, I would hope so. A lot of the characters are like underage and weird.
Yeah. And so I also think it's interesting where it's like, okay, it's not just an argument about is there any sexual content. It's also like how the content is used versus, I think there definitely is like an author gender bias. Like, I've seen a couple people, I think N.K. Jemisin wrote like a piece on it about how like her and other female authors who write adult fantasy, they consistently have to fight against being shelved as YA just because they're women, and it's like ridiculous.
Yeah.
But
like
sorry,
Naomi Novik's books and stuff.
Yeah.
Who?
So many Naomi Novik, like so many people call Uprooted like young adult, and I'm like, it's not young adult. And
Really, I always thought it was young adult. See, no, I didn't even know.
Yeah, it's adult. Yep. Okay, so sorry for that like tangent. My battery is actually getting low on my laptop. So before we wrap up, we're going to talk about the next live show date, and then maybe just to finish up, we can just like share one of our favorite parts from the Opal Deception if we want to do that. Let me look at our calendar. Let's see.
I also have my calendar up.
Okay.
So we could do either the May 26th or June 2nd.
I would think June 2nd would be best. Yeah. What do you guys think?
Let's do June 2nd.
Yeah.
June 2nd? Okay. And whose channel is it? Is it Taylor or Giselle?
Yeah, it's my channel.
Okay. I thought it was your channel.
I'm excited because it'll be the new one. It'll be me continuing the series. So
yeah. So our next live show, and I will put this information in the description box too, but our next live show for The Lost Colony, I just blanked on the title, book number 5, will be June 2nd at our usual time, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. And then, if we just want to like finish up with a little bit about any like favorite parts or favorite lines we had for this book. I think that would be fun.
Yeah. For me, it would be Root's death scene. I just thought it was so wonderfully crafted and like high stakes. And when it doesn't work out the way you want it to, just you really feel Holly's devastation. And I thought it was probably one of my favorite moments in the series. It was just done so well.
Yeah. And I feel like, because I also had that, we talked about the scene earlier, how it's like, it's our favorite, but we hate it. Like, I feel like Holly, like, it was very believable in the way that she continued to grieve for like the whole book. Like, you know, they have all these other bigger things going on, but it's not like she just forgets about the fact that like somebody important to her died. Like, I felt like there were emotional consequences for it. In addition to that, like the other characters responding to it, like the fact that after Artemis gets his memory back, he specifically tells her, like, I'm sorry, like I knew he died earlier, but now it means something, and I'm sorry you lost him. Like, yeah, I just feel like everything about his death, like it breaks my heart, but it was handled, I think, really well.
I agree. Yeah.
Instead, can I complain about two things?
Of course.
I guess.
So just like two things that really irritated me in this book. One is just like, I noticed that they talked about like Corporal Frond and like how she wears makeup.
Yes.
And I'm like, like, please, like, I get that it's a little bit of an older book. It's geared towards like 12-year-old boys, but let's not put down women for wearing makeup, and you're not automatically a ditz if you wear makeup.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Juliet
and then the
Butler,
other thing,
an example.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's another thing I didn't like about this book. I just missed Juliet. Best character, not even in the book
I love
at all.
her.
They just like mention her offhand. Oh, she's like wrestling, which is sick, but I still missed her.
Clearly she's living her best life, but
at least she's living her life. But the other thing that just really irritated me, and maybe this is like what put me in a bad mood for the rest of the book, but right at the beginning during the heist scene, when Butler is standing there and he has his like paper up and he's holding his arms up for like a minute and a half, and he starts complaining. He's like, Artemis, my arms hurt. And I'm like, that's what makes your arms hurt? Just like doing this. Anyone can do this for a minute and a half and it won't kill you. Like,
the man took down a troll.
I'm like,
he's tired. He aged a lot since the last book.
This was extra 15 years.
But really, Butler, like, the fact that he was complaining about it as well, like, I don't think that was consistent with his character at all, and I think it just kind of irritated me for the rest of the book, where I'm like rolling my eyes, and I'm like, again, like the character consistency, where it's like, it was really just in there, I think, to highlight like Artemis being like sneaky and stuff, but like I feel like it just pulled away from it, and I'm just like, ugh, he wouldn't do that. He would. He would be able to do it. It's fine. It's no big deal. Like, he's like super ripped and stuff, and obviously like weight trains and stuff. Like,
yes, he does.
I mean, and it's not like he's standing there with like two like 50-pound weights or whatever. It's a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And then the fact that he was whining. He's like,
yeah,
my arms are getting really tired. Go faster.
Something consistent that I did love about characters is how like I feel like this has happened in just about every book, and I remember it happens later too, is like every time Artemis is in a situation where he has to like run for his life, like literally run, he's like, I need to start working out, and he like never does.
I love how much of a wimp he is.
He's like he spends so much like mental energy thinking about how he hates running, and I'm like, same. Like,
relatable.
It just really cracks me up because he's running for his life from him and Holly are running for their lives from trolls, and the whole time Artemis's internal monologue is like, if we get out of this, I guess I actually need to like do stuff. Like, I love that.
Since this keeps happening.
Yep.
That part has always been my favorite, though. I love seeing Artemis and Holly interact when he has like no idea who she is.
Yeah.
I think that's like, it's like quite funny, but also really sad.
Yeah.
Poor Holly. She's like, oh, you're an asshole again. Great.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and also like she's just been through this like emotional trauma. She like barely saved his life and everything, and he's like, who are you? Like, yeah. Okay. So my battery is like gonna die soon. I'm sorry.
Okay. You're
But
fine.
thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed our little tangent on why middle grade is not a genre. It's actually an age designation. I had so much fun talking about that though. Like that is a passion of mine, is like talking about why those things bother me. So and as we said, our next live show is going to be June 2nd on Taylor's channel at the same time. All that information will also be in the description, and I'll also link everyone's channels and information. And yeah, thank you guys for joining us. See you next time.
Yes. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.